Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Wednesday Night Live. If you remember Laughing, by the way, at the end of Laughing, there was always one guy clapping. If you remember, that's how it ended every week, before your day. So, we are going to be covering preventive versus symptomatic medicine, how to preempt problems. And it's dedicated by Dr. Ilona L. Tobin in blessed memory of her mother, Marjorie C. Katyuk. May this good, honest, caring, devoted mother who raised 2 daughters alone find eternal peace. Yes, indeed. So it's beautiful to be able to dedicate eternal words of Torah and universal wisdom, which we hope can all help us all, to a soul who may not be physically right here with us, but is spiritually with us. If anybody wants to dedicate future classes or programs, you can do so online or just contact us or contact me. Be happy and be honored to do so. So, I did a little research and I discovered that over $4 trillion annually is paid in the healthcare system in the United States alone. Over $4 trillion as of this year. Last year was $3.6 trillion. It basically goes up by, I tried to figure out how much it's in the world. The world is probably a little more than double. So probably over $9 trillion. So I thought to myself, and this is a good way to put our discussion in context, how much of that, of those trillions of dollars, could have been prevented? Yeah, we don't, how would you like to have a few extra $1 trillion in this pocket change? Not bad, right? And what could we have done with that money? Now, I know the next question is, and how much food do we waste? Basically, you can eliminate famine if we just took all the garbage bins of a month's, maybe even less, of your McDonald's or whatever, any food. So waste is definitely a big issue. And then I said to myself, okay, that's prevented. And how much of this healthcare, so-called, is even unnecessary? How many people are taking meds or going to therapy just because they're indulging themselves and it's not even a real need, so to speak? And how much of it is psychological and emotional? So a lot of good questions in analyzing this $4 trillion cost. And I'm sure we'll never get answers to all these questions, because how are you going to figure it out? Who's going to say, I'm taking medication even though I don't need it? I mean, you're not going to get. But it's a good way to put into context the health care situation we're in. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to be talking about this so much about physical health, much more mental health and spiritual and psychological, emotional health, which today we know, they say as a body, mind, soul medicine. It all goes hand in hand anyway. And I wanted to talk about it because I think it really begs a much bigger question. Can we indeed find methods that help us prevent health issues? What's called preventive medicine, the title of this discussion here. Preventive medicine, of course, preempts, so you don't even get into the trouble in the first place, as opposed to symptomatic medicine, which deals with symptoms. What does that mean? Once you have a symptom, you start trying to solve it. Preventive medicine, in the broader sense of the word, is basically if you bring up a child with healthy habits and healthy attitudes and so on, who knows how much you prevent in that child's life of misery and aggravation and anxiety and depression and so on. So what are there such methods? And of course the answer is yes, and we'll be discussing that. But that really forces us to even a bigger question. What exactly is health? And I don't think everybody's going to answer that same answer. What exactly means health? Now, we understand health on a physical level. Basically, you're breathing smoothly, your heart is pumping, the vital signs, you go for a checkup, and the doctor comes back and says, okay, everything is working well. We know it basically functions. But I would submit that that's hardly the full picture of a person's well-being. You can be healthy like a horse and physically fit and really be unhealthy emotionally and unhealthy in relationships and unhealthy psychologically. a narcissist could be perfectly 100% healthy physically, and yet they're very unhealthy. So it's interesting, in our society, physical health and so-called spiritual health has become dichotomized. It wasn't that way in the past. I actually wrote an article around 2 years ago, did some research on this. Once upon a time, the healers were spiritual healers. They were also the medical healers. It's really with the Enlightenment, when science began to essentially push religion out, and maybe for good reason, because religion was corrupt and was being misused and abused, etc., but they also went overboard, and essentially medicine became the domain of practitioners, not necessarily people who understand human beings. You could have a doctor who's a total imbecile. He's just an excellent, he's technically great. Like he's a techie. But try to have a conversation. Like they say, don't try to have a conversation about personal or philosophical matters with your doctor, because you won't respect them anymore. Now, I'm not saying every doctor. There's some doctors that are really beautiful people and excellent bedside manner and really kind and humble and compassionate. But we know that in our society today, very often efficiency is not equated with being a mensch. Efficiency means you're good. Your statistics are good. Without mentioning names, I deal with doctors because a lot of people come to me, so I often talk to doctors, and there's always that other side where today, especially today, it's understood that you can't just practice medicine. You need to have also a counselor, and you have someone that can guide someone along if they're going into surgery or they're dealing with trauma or something. It's not just physical intervention. You also need psychological intervention. So I've dealt with doctors and some unbelievable people who really understand that healing is not we don't own the power of healing. It's divine. I remember a doctor, not Jewish, in New York, and NYU, not New York, NYU. Was it on First Avenue? And NYU, huh? NYU Lingo. Yeah, right. And really interesting guy, great guy. He told me he worked in the world in the domain of fertility. He said and he's a real expert. And he said to me, it's Dr. Griffo. I could say his name because I'm saying something good. I won't say the bad guys. And he said to me, the more he knows, the more divine and miracle it is. And he said, we are not healers. God is the healer. The human body and nature has the power to heal. We're facilitators. We make sure that the healing process moves smoothly. There aren't impediments. It was a very interesting way I would put it, really in a very beautiful, humble way. Now, he's an expert, but he's an expert not that he thinks he owns life and death. And he had that sense, and he said, especially fertility, he says, everything could be right on paper, everything checks out, and says that this person can have a child, and just don't. Or the opposite. Everything doesn't check out, and the person gets pregnant. The woman conceives. And he says he's seen it many times. So I said, is it just something you don't know? He says, no, the factors are so many that, you can't, the combination of things, you can't estimate, you can't predict anything because there's so many little details. Just think about millions of lines of code. So you can make an estimation, and you could say the likelihood. But it was a very interesting way of how he put the power of healing. So I wrote that article. You can look it up online. And essentially, it was always known that healing, as I think Aristotle that said it, or Plato, one of the Greek philosophers that said, health is a sound soul in a sound body. And it was never seen as two different worlds. No one ever said that you can be, look, for example, let's take football. Look what's happened to so many football players, whether it's brain damage or it's the culture of violence. And you see, and they become our heroes. O.J. Simpson was the classic story. Now, who is it that just hung himself? And we worship them. We worship their skill and their brute strength and their ability. But in a sense, their souls are being sacrificed in the process, and no one even focuses on that. Now, it becomes unpopular. The NFL knows that the public is going to demand it. They're going to have to bring in some. But they do it only because that's his business. But it's interesting. You see that you can literally worship athletic aptitude, athletic prowess, and forget altogether there's a soul inside that person. You watch a football game. Who even thinks about the soul? And I don't mean soul necessarily in any. I just mean the spiritual part of the person, the psychological part, the emotion. What is the emotional impact of playing a game with millions of people watching you and cheering you on like a gladiator? Except today we don't kill physically, but maybe we are. Boxing. I mean, there's a certain thing, but boxing, I remember that article I read when I was a kid, and I was like shocked of how many times what happens to the brain is suspended in the cranium in a way that allows it the resilience to deal with a blow. But that's an accidental blow or a fall. But here you're deliberately hitting someone in the head to essentially create a concussion. That's the ultimate knockout. And we cheer on. Now, I'm not coming out here to, it's not my job here to criticize the culture, but what it indicates is a real serious dissonance between what defines health. And you'll say this guy, Muhammad Ali, or this one, that one, is well fit, and they'll say he's 200 and this, and he's the perfect fit. And you say, what about what's going on in his mental state? Does he have any compassion for the person he's about to hit? So I understand. So they make rules, they have padded gloves, and you can't hit below the belt, blah, 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 blah. But come on. My point I'm making here is that health, the fact that we use that word health and that $4 trillion industry, we have to understand what the word health is. And unless we understand that, it's impossible really to talk about preventive medicine and symptomatic medicine, because, for example, if your focus is completely on physical health, simply the physical being, and you've never developed the personality and the character of a child growing older, but they're very healthy, you're going to have yourself no preventive medicine at all. You're going to have many, many problems that are so much connected to the psychological and the attitude. Dr. Sarna is well known today for back problems being related to anxiety. And most people concede that is accurate. Even though initially it was looked at somewhat like quack medicine, what does anxiety have to do with back problems? But today it's increasingly known that anxiety affects your physical being. And not just what's the word I want to use? What do they call when you give it? They do the tests. They give someone a real pill and they give a placebo, right? And not just a placebo effect or psychological, you think you're in pain, therefore you're in pain. It actually has psychosomatic effects. I've told the story a number of times about my own experience. I suffered when I was a teenager, younger, of allergies, especially ragweed. Those summer allergy that would begin mid-August to the end of September, or beginning of August to mid-September, whatever it was, and it was miserable. It wasn't dangerous initially. It was basically miserable. Your whole plumbing system gets stuffed up. Your nose is running, your throat is itching, your eyes are rubbing. Just when everyone says the most beautiful day, it's going to be the most miserable day. And this was year after year. Then one summer, I was in Detroit, and I seemed to have probably then I was around a lot of ragweed. It must have been an overdose, so to speak. And I had this basically asthmatic attack. I couldn't breathe. So the nurse gave me something to open up my channels and told me I better go to a doctor, and I did. I got back to New York. I went to Dr. Redner. He was a very famous allergist. And he gave me the tests, the scratch tests. And dust and ragweed both blew up. And as a matter of fact, I was so sensitive that right there I had another reaction. So he saw it. Literally, it was difficult breathing. He gave me a shot of something. And suddenly, in this midsummer night's dream, breezy day, everything cleared up. And I said, what was that? He said, adrenaline. Adrenaline. So I said to him, so why don't you give me all these tests? Just give me adrenaline, I'll take adrenaline. He says, you'll build up immunity to it, and then you'll need more, and it's not healthy. At some point, it's not going to be good for you. But for now, for emergency, I gave it to you. So I said, is this adrenaline the same adrenaline that we generate naturally when we get excited and when we're enthusiastic about something and anticipating? He says, absolutely. So I said, I need to ask you something. I was working then at the time, a little after that, I was working on the Lubavitcher Rebbe's talks. So my job was to memorize hours and hours of the Farbrengens, and then after Shabbos, write it down. It was very intense and very, very concentrated work, very difficult. And on Sundays, I realized I never felt allergies, even though it was the middle of the allergy season. So I used to think, I'm so busy, I don't even notice my nose is running or something. You know how it is. You get so busy, you don't even think about it. So I said, is it possible that because I have such pressure and the adrenaline is really flowing because of a lot of intense focus, is it possible my natural adrenaline is countering the allergic reactions? He says, absolutely. And then he told me this, amazing. He says, do you ever see Broadway or a concert or opera? You could have actors or concert pianist or an opera singer for 3-4 hours be on stage, and they won't yawn and they won't sneeze. He says, how is that possible? A yawn and a sneeze, especially a sneeze, is not controllable. You know, if you have something stuck, is he going to sneeze? He says, because when your adrenaline is running, you have a superhuman control over your body. To the point that even if you want to set your mind, better than an alarm clock. I want to wake up 6 a.m., 6 a.m. on the dot, and no one can figure out why. How does your body know it's 6 a.m.? And it's happened, I'm sure everybody. So he says, because there's that, you can't fake it. If it's a true adrenaline rush, it will have this unbelievable impact, and yes, it's a healing agent. And it can counteract. So it's absolutely clear that mindset and your psychological state of mind, your positivity, what they call today positive psychologists, positivity and so on, translates into chemicals, just like pleasure is, dopamine or serotonin and so on. These are physical chemicals generated by particular experiences or even thoughts. You can think a pleasurable thought and it will flow, something will flow. Now obviously, we're not going here into the quack dimension where somebody, let's say, is extremely positive and God forbid they get in an accident and they have a cut, the cut will go away. We're not talking about a Superman reaction like that. But that's just in general just a more of a fantastical. We're talking about on a more fundamental level that your well-being, being a positive person, generates positive things. Lately, there's a lot of studies about gratitude. I don't know if you've seen these. It's tremendous. How gratitude impacts people's health and their aging process and longer years, and many diseases are counteracted by gratitude. Now in Torah and Judaism, gratitude is a major thing. Moda'ani, we say Moda in the morning. Hodu, we acknowledge, we thank. Even Modim, when we in the Amida, in the Shemon Esrei, it says when the cantor repeats the whole Shemon Esrei, the Chazar Sashatz, when it comes to Modim, everybody participates because you can't send someone to say thank you for you. You know, you have to say thank you yourself. And gratitude has more than just, gratitude is a nice thing. You did a favor for me, I say thank you. That's obvious. But it actually has healing powers. So the list goes on, and when you go into this area, and it's become quite, remember Bill Moyer's had, I think, a series, right? Body, mind, soul, something like that, medicine. It becomes very clear on a holistic level, we are not fragmented pieces. A healthy person is a healthy soul inside of a healthy body. And you could be perfect on the monitors, but you could be a miserable wreck, like a zombie, if you don't have your psychological health in place. So I'm going to define health from sources that go back long before the Enlightenment, when it was when it was an integrated process. And it was an integrated process. If you look in the Bible, you'll see the healers were the Kohanim, were the priests. It was the spiritual leaders that were considered soul doctors. See, today a rabbi, who would say a rabbi is a soul doctor? A rabbi, administrator, a fundraiser, maybe charismatic, could be knowledgeable, knows how to lead a community. When's the last time you heard someone say a rabbi? People ask me, what's a rabbi? I say, a rabbi is a soul doctor. And people laugh, they say, I've never met a rabbi like that. That was a rabbi. Moses was a soul doctor. He understood souls. He was a sensitive, empathetic, humble servant who was able to help people work through their internal issues. Now, yes, of course there's an element of knowledge, an element of being a judge, being a lawyer, but a judge and a lawyer, again, has been divorced and separate. It's interesting, since we're talking to some attorneys here, let me tell you something. The Torah says that when the judges sit in judgment in a case, so the words in the Torah are very interesting. It says, V'shaftu ha'eda, v'hitzilu ha'eda. You shall judge the people, and you shall preserve them. You shall save them. So the question is asked, 1 second, you're sitting in judgment, you shouldn't be biased. Whatever it is, if they're guilty, they're guilty. If they're not guilty, they're not guilty. Why would the Torah encourage you to be focusing on trying to help them? Because the Torah is saying that law never came to what do they say? Not educate. How do you say? To Another word for judge, for, adjudicate. It's not just to know whether you're guilty. It came to help people be better people. And sometimes you may need discipline, sometimes you need, but never think that judgment is an end in itself. The true search for justice is the true search for making people healthier. And if they behave in an unhealthy way, there has to be deterrence, and there has to be. So, but never think of punishment or guilt as an end in itself, which is interesting. It's basically law with a heart and soul. You don't hear much about that. Maybe, I don't know, in law school, maybe they do some lip service. Not even that. Not even lip service. In Judaism, it never sees a human being as just some type of object. We're going to judge this person. We're going to heal this person. A human being is a full entity, and that full entity is a soul inside of a body. So how would we define health? The root for health is a Germanic word that they say connects to wholesomeness and to holiness. Interesting. Health was once hala, and that became health, and they say the same root for holy and for wholesome, which of course spelled differently. Interestingly, from a Jewish point of view, from the Torah point of view, I will translate health the following. Health is harmony, is balance. If you think about it, that's really what health is on all levels. Whether it's cardiology, whether it's neurology, whether it's immunology, whatever it may be, it is ultimately balance, a balance. But the balance goes further than just the physical. It's the balance of a human being in their life, their temperament, their personality, their character. So in essence, a healthy child is born. If you were to look at this healthy child, you're going to see more than just a physical body that's sound, and you'll see the lungs being used, you'll see the lungs heaving up and down because they're using 100% of the lungs, and you'll see what a healthy body, but you also see a healthy spirit. The inquisitiveness of a child, its enthusiasm, the lack of duplicity, the lack of self-consciousness. These are all healthy attributes. Now, we adults, as we grow into adulthood, we determine what health is by compartmentalizing and saying, okay, I'm healthy because I eat well, and my heart is good, and my other vital signs are all working well. However, really, health has to be gauged more than that by the personality and disposition and the attitude of a person. So, as always, I always go back to children because that's the best model. We were all once children, and frankly, as children, we were healthier people. And then just as children grow into adult life and they begin to absorb the toxins of this world, which affects their breathing and affects their heart and affects the rest of their systems, they also absorb, unfortunately, the psychological toxins, which are people's attitudes, people's hypocrisy, people's duplicity, people's selfishness and jealousies and all the vices that we talked about in the last 8 weeks. And then suddenly you have a human being that's all full of all kinds of punctures, so to speak. And we're so lost, we don't even know what the healthy model is. Someone say, okay, you know what, you want to become a healthy person? Tell me, what model you're going to follow? So when it comes to lungs and heart and the physical parts of the physiology of a human being, we have books. A doctor will look at take an x-ray of your lungs, juxtapose it near lungs that are healthy and see, here there's a block, here there's, God forbid, a lesion, or whatever. But what's our model for psychological emotional health? Do two people even agree what that is? Well, the Torah comes and does give us that version. And it's connected actually to the period in time we are right now. And that period in time is the month of Iyar. We just entered. We're now, the Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of a new month, the Hebrew month of Iyar. Iyar is 4 letters, Aleph, Yud, Yud, Resh. And there's an acronym, which in this acronym is concealed a formula for health. What is the acronym? Ani Hashem Rofecha. The Aleph is Ani, I. The Yud refers to God's name. And the Resh, the last letter, is I, God, am your healer. And it's referring to a verse. It's referring to a verse. And the verse, we actually read it on the 7th day of Passover. So it's in the book of Exodus. It's after the Jews got finally eliminated, or were freed, I should say, from the Egyptian yoke, because they pursued them into the sea, and that was finally the end of it. So God says that now I will not place any more illness on you. It says, I will not place any illness because I, God, am your healer. And when you read the verse, it's interesting. It's the first place, the first documented place of preventive medicine. Because he says, I will not place it upon you. Not that you will be sick and I will heal you. That's one statement. You get sick, here's there's the verses that talk about getting sick and then finding healing. Here he says, I am blessing you, and you follow and connect with me, and I will not place upon you. You will never have to deal with illness in the first place. The question is, what does this mean? Is this some type of religious statement, some type of faith healing, or is there something deeper? Of course, the answer is something deeper. Rhetorical question. So let me put it to you this way. I once spoke at a medical conference, and obviously not as a doctor, but there were questions that I was asked to speak about the future of medicine. In Jewish faith and the faith of many, the world will come to a point where disease, illness, even death will be eradicated. So I talked about that, what that means. So this may sound a little wild, but interestingly, it's not so wild. The beginning of the Bible states something very fascinating. It says, God says, do not eat from the tree of knowledge. Eat from the tree of life, but not from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The day you will eat from it, you will die. And the commentaries explain that doesn't mean the day, it means the day you eat from it, death will enter and you'll ultimately die. Had you did not eat from it, there will be no death, which of course is a very intriguing statement. What does that mean? To us, death seems to be part of nature. And living forever would be a miracle. And from the Torah's point of view, death is an aberration. Now, you may say, okay, this is one of the weird things of the Torah. Okay, you got to believe that, etc. But if you want to think about it logically. Step aside. Forget about the fact that we see death and we know that everything in this natural world deteriorates, erodes, and then perishes and dies. Which, frankly, is not even accurate. Once Einstein showed E equals mc squared, the fact is actually nothing dies. It just changes form. You can't even destroy something completely. You can turn matter into energy. Just like you can heat water and it'll become gas, but the gas doesn't disappear. You just can't identify it. It dissipates, but it's there somewhere. So truth is, you can say the same is about life and death. What dies? What dies is the body deteriorates, the body decomposes, but the spirit or whatever that body becomes part of the nutrients of the earth, that doesn't ever dies. Just like an apple that rots in the ground doesn't die, it becomes part of something. It's on its way toward a second. That's in general, but more specifically, think of it this way. Here's the question. Why indeed should a person die? Why should there be death? If a soul, and we know a soul is not like a car that runs out of gas, a soul is filled with divine energy. Why should there ever be a moment where soul and body need to separate? And the answer is, let me elaborate a little bit more. If you think about it, put water into a cup. Besides for the factors of evaporation, why would the water ever have to run out of the cup? There'd be no reason to. However, what happens if the cup gets punctured? If the cup is incomplete, the cup breaks down, then there's nowhere to hold that water. The same thing is what happened when they ate from the tree of knowledge. The mystics and the theologians explain, Jewish, that when they ate from the tree of knowledge, they punctured the physical world and not allowing that seamless connection to the spiritual flow. So essentially what happened was the physical material universe has now became subject to the laws of aging and deterioration and erosion and so on. But had the body and the physical been completely aligned with its purpose, then there's no reason for soul and body to have to ever separate. That's what the Torah is saying. Now for us it's a fantastic idea because we've never seen that. But if you think about it, let's talk about the tree of knowledge. What it meant to not eat from the tree of knowledge. Now most of us think of consciousness as a positive thing. If you're conscious and aware, it's a good thing. The truth is, if you think about it, the healthiest state of being is when you're not conscious of what you're doing. Let me explain. When you're so immersed in something, where you don't see the difference between the object and the subject, between you and your experience, you're so absorbed in the experience, then you're in the zone. Children are that way. You ask a child when they're playing, they say, are you aware that you're playing? Most children will say, no, I'm not aware. However, when you talk about adults, then we have, you're aware of yourself experiencing something. Think of it this way. Maybe this is a little Zen-like. You say, you put a dry hand in water, the hand gets wet. Do fish get wet? Does water get wet? So when you think of it this way, sometimes they say love for men is a verb and for women it's a noun. When it's a state of being, then you become part of the experience, and there's no two things going on. However, when it's an experience, it means that I am experiencing something. So essentially, the way it's understood is that before they ate from the tree of knowledge, there was no self-consciousness. That's why they were naked and they were not ashamed. Their sexuality, just as their consciousness and their identities, were one and were so seamlessly connected to what they were doing that they weren't aware of what they were doing. Is a child self-conscious about being naked? A child comes out of its mother's womb? No, because a healthy, and not because it's stupid or naive, is because there's no reason to be conscious. The only reason we're conscious is because other people are conscious. So in truth, being self-conscious is the source for so many of psychological issues. You'll see people who are really comfortable in their own skin, and they're comfortable with themselves. They're not conscious of themselves. They don't carry guilt. They don't carry shame. They don't carry all the feelings of, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, because if you grow up in a healthy environment, that's the way it is. By contrast, you grow up in an environment that is critical and undermines you and doesn't validate you, what do you think happens? You're constantly conscious of yourself. You're always looking over your shoulder. What did I do wrong? Who's judging me? Who doesn't like it? You want to be a pleaser. You don't want to be disliked. You don't want to be not accepted. But the people who are extremely comfortable with themselves don't have that issue because them object and subject has melted into one. And that's a state of ultimate health. I'll give another example. I'll give even a more basic example. If I were to ask you, and I ask everybody, whoever they are, wherever you are, what is your left leg doing? So now suddenly you think about it, right? And now what was it doing right before I asked that question? It was there. It was alive. Just because you're not aware of something doesn't mean it's not happening. So let me ask you, what's more of a real experience, when you're aware of it or when you're not aware? So I would submit, if someone said to you, for example, what does health feel like? If you have an answer, you need a doctor. Health shouldn't feel like anything. As soon as you're feeling it, you know there's a problem. Now, I know it's counterintuitive because we usually think in terms of, I want to feel it, I want to experience it, I want the sensation. But sensations and feelings mean you're already outside of the experience. What they call being in the zone. You ever read a book? You're completely absorbed in the book. You don't even realize you're turning pages. You can actually be sweating. You can be crying. You can be laughing. And someone comes in and says, you're reading a book? It's just pages and words. It's a novel. It's not even real. What's happening? The writer has so engaged you that you feel like you're part of the story, even though you're reading it, and you don't even feel the difference. Those that play music know this. But as a writer, I can tell you, there are times where you feel you're writing. That's not good. You get in a place where it's just the flow. It just flows. Then you know. And you can't always prepare for that. Sometimes you have to spend hours of working hard, and then suddenly you get into that zone, and it's like just a gift. It's a gift. You see this with people who train a lot, and they become real professionals. Sometimes you see the fifth set of a major championship tennis game. Two greatest players. And even if you're watching, your heart's almost falling out. And you think, how could they even have that composure to serve without their hand shaking? Right? And you're watching, you're not even there. And you're not even, nothing at stake except watching a game and one of these nail biters. The answer is, when you train long enough, then when the moment comes, you're so much in the zone, and you could interview, this is musicians, athletes, writers, anyone that is involved in, immersed in something, there comes a point where you literally become so much part of the experience, you don't even distinguish between you and the experience. That is the healthiest state of a human being. If we could be that way 24/7, we'd be in very good shape. However, we're not that way. So when Adam and Eve were told, do not eat from this tree of knowledge, what was the tree of knowledge? To know good and evil. Now, what do you think? They didn't know good and evil before? The mere fact that they can make the choice not to follow God's will means that they had the ability to transgress. But they knew it theoretically. It's like, you read about evil in a book. But once you taste from the forbidden fruit, it's a big difference. Many people think, because I know something is forbidden, I might as well taste it. Now, once you cross that line, everything changes. Because now you've experienced it. Once you've experienced it, you are no longer a seamless, you've lost your innocence, basically. And once you lost your innocence, you're no longer a fish in water. Now it takes effort, which is why the cause and effect of the eating of the tree of knowledge affected the human being. It says, man from now on will have to work by the sweat of his brow, and a woman will suffer the pains of birth and pregnancy and birth. What's the connection? The connection is very simple. Because work, if you are a seamless agent of the divine in this world, God will take care of your needs. Once you think you're a separate entity, so now you figure out how to make a living here. In other words, a person who's completely committed to the purpose of their lives and doesn't have any side agendas. And I always pointed out, people say, you ask people, who are you? And they give you their business card. That's not who you are, that's what you do. As soon as there's a dichotomy between who you are and what you do, you have yourself an object-subject. If that's the case, now work for a living. It's like that story with the scientist who has this debate with, this imaginary debate with God, and saying, I don't need a God, there is no God. We scientists can do anything God does. Okay, so the voice from heaven comes and says, fine, go ahead, plant a seed and make it grow. Scientist, no problem. I have a laboratory, I have an incubator, I have these test tubes, I've got the whole thing. He goes out to the garden, takes some earth, brings it into his lab, and God says, no, use your own earth. Understand? Using my earth to replicate. Use your own earth. So if you are seamlessly connected, then you are an agent, and you do not need to go ahead and work for the sweat of your brow. Work in the days of the Greeks and the Romans, work was considered for the inferior people. The king philosophers were not workers; they had workers. Work was considered an inferior activity. It was the Calvinists that introduced the Protestant work ethic and so on. But work was always considered to be inferior work, because work was part of the sin, what they called the original sin, and therefore work was a curse, a punishment for the original sin. Now, from a Jewish point of view, it's a little different. The Jewish point of view is like this. The fact that we have to work the land is, yes, because now you have created a dichotomy, a schism between matter and spirit. So matter will not just produce fruit without your effort. Had you not created that schism, it would have been a seamless flow. Just like health would have been seamless, and just like death would have been an aberration. Because there's no reason for there to be a split between the two realities, matter and energy. There's a lot more to be said about this, and I've talked about it in different classes, but the key point that I'm making here is that a healthy person is not just what medicine today says healthy, that all the vital signs are functioning. A healthy person is healthy in spirit and personality and character. A person that's not a kind person is not a healthy person, period. There's no ifs or buts. Why? Because kindness is not just what you do for other people, it's also what you do for yourself. The Kabbalists and the Hasidic masters explain that just like the body is made up of parts, and you have to nourish each of those parts, so too the soul and the spirit and the psyche is made up of parts. And you also have to nourish them. So in a physical level, you need vitamins, you need nutrients, you need chemicals, vitamin A, vitamin B, calcium, iron, all the works. You need all these things. Protein, I don't know about carbs, but you need all that to be a healthy person. And if you have a deficiency, you need to supplement it. What about the soul? What about your psyche? What about your personality? It's a good question. So most people say, okay, you got to have a good attitude. No. It's also made up of parts, and those are called the 10 spheres. The intellectual faculties, the emotional ones. We are now in this period, I said, Ir is Ani Hashem Refecha, I, God, am your healer. We heal in this period in time and try to access that preventive medicine by counting these 49 days, and each day corresponds to another one of our components of our personalities and emotional attributes. Have you seen, you may have seen the book I did on the Omer, Actually, I have a few here if anyone wants it. But you could also get it online. There's an app now, my Omer app. I might as well plug all that. And also a daily email. So what is it? It's to take chesed sheba chesed, kindness within kindness, discipline within kindness. And you go through all the 49, 7 times 7 attributes, and you're literally doing a examination. Think of it as a psychological a checkup, a health checkup. What do they call a health? What do they call? A checkup. And you're identifying where are your strengths. For example, some people are givers. They're very good givers, but they don't know when to stop giving. They can spoil others. They can hurt others in the name of love. So you have to counter that with a certain measure of discipline, which is gvura, was the second attribute. Then comes compassion, tiferes. Then comes netzach, endurance. You could be a very kind person, but as soon as it gets tough, you retreat. Endure. You need netzach and chesed to keep it enduring, to keep it the drive. Then you need humility within kindness, and then you need bonding within kindness, and you need sovereignty. You need dignity within kindness, and each one. The next is discipline. Discipline needs kindness within discipline, and needs compassion within discipline, and so on. So it's not an accident that this 49-day period between Passover and Shavuos is about the healing and the refinement. The birur hamidus is the language used in Hasidic terminology. As you say in the prayer, the refinement of your personality. In the month, which the primary month where we count, even though it begins in Nisan and ends in Sivan, it begins in the month of Passover and ends in the month of Shavuos, but the full month of Iyar, which is, as I said, Ani Hashem Rafecha, the acronym of the month, is about healing. But not healing. Symptomatic healing is taking a problem and figuring out a Band-Aid or another way, a remedy, a remedial medicine to deal with the symptoms. We're talking about preventive. Preventive means educating and training ourselves, our children, to be healthy in the first place. So you don't need to deal with many issues. Now you can say, 1 second, what about us adults? We're already no longer children. Even adults can also assume new way of looking at things that you can prevent for the future. And that is first defining what is a healthy person. So we were talking about this right before the class. We live in an extremely advanced society by all measures. It's advanced in technology, in communications, in medicine. Just look at longevity. Look at the age expectancy. It's double from 1930. I think it was 48 then. Now it's in the 80s. Women a little higher. That's not a small number. That's significant. How many diseases have been conquered? Diseases that wiped out entire millions of people. So there's no question that there are advancements that are breathtaking, that were unprecedented. But the interesting thing is, and this can never be forgotten, and that's why when it comes down to it and you think of Jewish thought, I'm talking about the universal aspect of Jewish thought, is always humble, even in the face of all these so-called breakthroughs and advancements, to remember that the human being is still the same human being before all these technologies. Just because we have the internet, and just because you can access any piece of information, anytime, anywhere, anything, anytime, anywhere, doesn't mean you're a healthier person. It doesn't mean you're a better father. It doesn't mean you're a better mother. It doesn't mean you're a better spouse. These are sophisticated tool chests. Even if we live till 100 and the age expectancy keeps going up, that doesn't mean you're having 100 healthy years. It just means we figured out how to master the machine. But health is about the individual personality of each one of us. So imagine if we were as advanced in our psychological, emotional health as we're advanced in technology, what would we have? We'd have a messianic age. So we have the machines are great. Our tool chests are unbelievable, and they're only going to get better. They're literally, we almost see it day to day. But the human being has not made any advancements in this regard because it does not reflect who we are. But we can deceive ourselves into thinking, hey, I'm driving a faster car. I have a better smartphone. I have better internet. I have all these different tools. So we almost consider ourselves saying, hey, that means I'm a better person. No. That leap is an absolute mistake. And and let's widen the discussion even broader. Talk about relationships. There's a sociologist that comes to this class once in a while. So I once asked him, what's the measure of a healthy society? So he gave me what's in his field. He says a healthy society, he said, was standard of living, healthcare, standard of healthcare, clean water, conquering famine. In other words, enough food and nutrition for everybody, and longevity and age expectancy. These are the main benchmarks of a healthy society. And based on that, he said, we're definitely the best, healthiest society that's ever been, because in all those areas we're greater than our parents and grandparents. And obviously, my question was a loaded one because I wanted to. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what we 4,000 years of experience has taught us something that modern sociology doesn't know." But it's very basic. It's very elementary, and that is the barometer of a healthy society is the welfare of our families, of our children. That's it. I don't have a whole list. It's one thing. Look at health of the children. Look at relationships, healthy marriages, healthy commitments, honest people, integrity. So I remember he laughed and he said, "Well, based on that, I think we may be one of the worst societies." So I said, "Can you see that? Can you imagine? You're a doctor in a PhD in sociology. I may be a PhD in Torah sociology, maybe, and it's completely two different barometers." I would say the same thing with health. Now, I'm not taking away from all the advancements. I'm saying absolutely. But it's like getting a better car, but the person that's driving the car is drunk, or the person that's driving the car is not better. At the end of the day, it's we humans that are going to be. I understand they talk about artificial intelligence and maybe we'll just replace humans with machines. I don't know if that's a blessing or curse, but I just rue the day. I hope we don't have a situation where instead of having a mother nurturing and cradling her newborn, we don't have a machine that feels like a mother. That I do not think is going to be great for society. Would you agree? And as much as we can replicate it. Like that, there's a joke. I don't know if it's a joke or it's a serious story or it's a tragedy. So there was in a preschool. So one of the teachers noticed that one of the little boys was seeming very clingy and needy. So she said, "You know what? She'll talk to the mother, woman to woman, have a heartfelt, not criticize her, but just like encourage her to maybe at home to." So she sits down and she prepared herself. She says, "Your little Harry comes to school and he seems very clingy, he seems very needy, he's very afraid. Maybe at home you should just really show a little more love in the morning, hug him a few times and just make him feel wanted, needed." And the mother was so receptive. She says, "Something that's very funny, because this morning I heard the same thing from someone else. So I told the nanny that you have to start hugging this child more." And so, you understand the point? Okay. Huh? She thought she solved the problem. And that's that. Now, I know we live in a tough world, but life was a little tougher for our grandparents, and they had less money. And we have to, today we have 2 working parents. And you say, "What about your children?" They say, "Well, the reason we're working is to give them security." Meanwhile, they're making their children insecure emotionally by giving them security, financial security. Anyway, it's not a sweeping critique. Maybe it is. But the point I'm making here, talking about health, this must be addressed. If you don't see a healthy child, a child that is playful, a child that's loose and flexible, a child that doesn't look over itself and is constantly wondering whether it will be criticized and judged, that's not health. I don't care how physically healthy that child is. There's something tremendously lacking. And that's preventive. Physical health, I would submit, yes, preventive. Obviously, brush your teeth and have good, healthy habits, hygiene habits, and other things will prevent many illnesses. No problem. I have no issue with that. But the real preventive medicine is on the psyche, soulful, spiritual, psychological, emotional spectrum. And there, it's lagging far behind. And I think we've all been guilty. It's so easy. The best babysitter for children is a video, is an iPad, a smartphone, right? You give it to them, they get hypnotized, and they're out of your hair. But imagine what that's doing. Instead of a mother, child and needy, sitting down and let's laugh together, let's talk, let's cry together, you're like depriving the child from the most important thing. You talk about relationships, and I say this not to you, I say this to everybody. If you don't develop that nurturing, warm, eye-to-eye, heart-to-heart contact with your parent, Of course you're going to have difficulty connecting to a stranger when the time comes that you're looking for your soulmate. Because you've never had experience to just have a healthy connection at the early formative years. Where do you think we learn how to love each other? We learn it in the early years. You know, you ever see, I don't know if you like these nature shows. I love watching many of them. And you see how, I mean, every animal, every species has its own thing. But otters, you got to see how otters bring up the young. You see it also with penguins and others. There's a certain nurturing. An otter will touch its young child maybe 40 times a minute just to reassure it. And it's been witnessed in cameras. So that type of thing, it's almost impossible to estimate the impact of what that type of, I would say, validation, vote of confidence, belief in your child, it does for that child as it grows into an adult. But more importantly, imagine when you don't have that. So you talk about preventive medicine. That's preventive medicine. The love of a parent to a child that's unconditional. The child matters. There's nothing else more important. I'm not running to work because I want to sit and talk to you. Nothing else is more important, not my phone, not my text. That is the best preventive medicine I submit in existence. Now, it doesn't sound dramatic. It says, what's the big thing? Of course I can do that. I've heard that many times. I've told this to parents. They tell me, what's the big thing? I'll do that. I said, no, don't give me no flippant. You'll do that. I'm talking about concentrated, deliberate sitting with your child. Not just you'll do it, you know, like you'll throw a bone. I'm talking about serious, does the child know that it's more important than your job? I guarantee you, ask children, they'll tell you that my parents' job is more important than me. And they may justify. They'll say because they make money, they pay my bills, they pay my education. Fine, that's because adults have to convince the children to believe that. But can you imagine? A child should be able to say, there's nothing more important than I am to my parents. That is preventive medicine. That's Ani Hashem Refecha. Because you're saying to your child, you're God's creature, you're created in the divine image, you're my gift, and nothing I'll accomplish in this world is more precious than you. It's simple as that. Now, we live in a world where we see our so-called conquests, our material conquests as what defines our success. You know, the awards we've gotten, the institutions we've built, the charity we've given, all fine and good. And I'm not taking anything away from that. But that is part of adult successes. The biggest thing that changes lives is what I'm talking about, the nurturing. Now you say, okay, what happens if I'm not a parent, or I'm not in that, or already a parent that my children are already grown and so on? We still nurture each other, even as friends. That validation. I mean, for me, I find it to be one of the greatest blessings. And I was just Passover away in a program. 1,000 other people. And I give different talks. But to me, the most gratifying part is when you sit with people one-on-one or one-on-two, and they share their lives, and you're able to give them hope, and not just hope, but some direction and guidance in this hostile, difficult world. Now, God should bless everyone. They shouldn't have any challenges. But that ability to nurture a spirit, to nourish someone's soul, to nourish someone's self-confidence, and to show them that you have in you everything you need to really succeed, I don't know if there's a greater gift that you can give somebody to then do that. I feel blessed because I have the opportunity to do it. I was around people that did it for me, so I know I'm trying to emulate what I was taught. And honestly, from all my achievements, I think those are my greatest. And I think most people would say the same, even though it's true. I mean, some accomplishments, you know, the fireworks and the glamour stuff, sometimes a lot, you know, it's more public and so on. But it's the quiet moments. It's that nurturing of a spirit. And I take that from the verse when it says that God, you know, finally the Egyptians, they got rid of the Egyptians. And God says, Le'osim alecha, kol hamachla, all the illness that I placed on Mitzrayim. And remember, the word Mitzrayim is not just Egypt. Oh, thank you, sorry, the word Mitzrayim means constraints. Because Mitzrayim is the root of all problems. Mitzrayim is the ultimate dissonance. It's the ultimate inhibition. It's the ultimate boundaries, the constraints. So all the machla, All the illnesses, we read this, as I said, we read it on the 7th day of Passover. All illnesses come from a constrained spirit, from a spirit that's looking for refuge. I mean, you'll read this in many places. People are looking for a home. They're looking to go home. They're looking for love. Adults are looking for love. And maybe they won't admit it. Maybe it sounds too simplistic. Maybe it sounds people's pride. We're looking to be loved. We're looking to be told and feel that we are important. And I don't mean from an arrogant point of view, that we have value. We have something important to contribute, indispensable to contribute. Nothing is greater than that message. And I'm not just saying words, I'm talking about when you really feel it. So what does he say? Kol hamacha shesamti, all the illness that I placed on Mitzrayim, meaning everything that comes from the Mitzrayims of our world, which is rooted in the tree of knowledge, that first dichotomy, that first dissonance. As the Kabbalists say, the tree of knowledge is rooted in the diminishment of the moon, which is rooted in the shattering of the containers of the world of Tohu, of chaos, which is rooted in the big Symptomatic, the great black hole and paradigm shift from the divine consciousness to independent human consciousness. That was the first dissonance. All these dissonances are under the word Mitzrayim. It says all the Goliaths are named on Mitzrayim. Every displacement is named Mitzrayim. That's why Kimeit Seis K'meretz Mitzrayim. Even though we left Egypt, it's still considered we're leaving, because every generation, every day, we need to envision that we're trying to get out of these constraints. Constraints is the antithesis to health. Disease, illness, whatever form is a form of constraint. It's a blockage. Something is not working because two things are not being able to flow in a harmonious way with one another. In the root of it, it's our dissonance and disconnection between you and your purpose, between you and the reason you were placed on this earth. You don't have that clear, everything else is going to be compromised. If you're blessed and lucky, you may not feel it. Or maybe the opposite, actually. If you're blessed and lucky, you should feel it, so that way you do something about it. The fact that many people walk around on this earth all happy and so on is, number one, we know how to become very comfortably numb, and we numb ourselves, and we don't, from existential loneliness and other things. There's so many distractions, so many ways to keep yourself busy and not have to think about yourself, And you got the dinner, you got the party. I mean, the sky's the limit. And if nothing else, you could just sit all day and just look for websites. You'll never end, If you want a particular website that's very interesting, try uselessknowledge.com. I'm serious, it's not a joke. It has a lot of good stuff, but it's useless. It's like you see, it's like interesting trivia. It'll keep you entertained. But then you say to yourself, why do I need to know this? And you say, I have no clue, it's just interesting stuff. I think useless knowledge or useless information. I think uselessknowledge.com. Check it out. In case you're looking for nothing to do. And we have, as I said many times, also mastered the art of the couch potato. Everything in this world is mobile. Everything is movement. Even the seasons. The trees go to sleep in the winter. They wake up in the spring, as they are now. They blossom in the summer. Then they go back into their hibernation in the autumn and the fall. But they're going, this is everything. Animals, nature, everything in this world. We're the only ones, the human being, that is trying to master the art of stopping motion. I'm sitting in I'm couch potato. I'm going to sit in my couch for the next 5 hours and do what? Nothing. And we master the art. I told the joke here a number of times. This old Jew is sitting on a bench. He's all depressed. His friend comes over. He says, Hirschel, what are you so depressed? He says, my wife is very angry at me. He said, what is she so angry about? He says, why are you so depressed? She's always angry at you. No, today was something special. What happened? This morning she went to work and she asked me, what am I going to do? And I said, I'm going to do nothing. In those words. She said, you said that yesterday. And I told her I wasn't finished. I love this joke. I wasn't finished doing what? Doing nothing. So nothing has become an objective, like animal bliss or whatever. The point is, we are somewhat a little absurd people, and that's what we look for. Like someone says, I'm into sports. Someone says, why don't you do something? I'm into sports. What sport are you into? Football. What do? You play football? He says, no, I watch football every Sunday. And someone says, you're living vicariously through other people. That's what television, or the soap operas. And it becomes us. Now, I know it's half humorous, but it's also half sad. The point I'm making here is that health is having a life. Health is understanding that you are, as I said, a divine agent in this world, and that you are needed. Needed. If you don't do what you're going to do in this world, in this lifetime, you are messing up creation, because the cosmic picture cannot be complete without you fulfilling your mission. We tell this to children from the young age in a real way. There's nothing more preventive medicine than that, because that prevents I'm looking for a high, I'm looking for excitement, I'm looking for my purpose. Now, when I say prevent, does that mean that life will not have challenges? Obviously, God forbid, there are illnesses, there are diseases that enter even when you've done everything right. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But like it is with anything, we try to minimize the risks. The healthier attitudes you have, the more resilient you are. I mean, Viktor Frankl built a whole logotherapy, Man's Search of Meaning, and it was confirmed when he saw how people who suffered, the worst suffering of in history, the Holocaust, and how their sense of meaning in life gave them an additional asset. What was that? Think about how does meaning in life help when your children are being, God forbid, cremated? It doesn't help, obviously, the pain, but it gives you an extra edge of being able to navigate through it. Not find answers, not minimize the pain or the loss, but some way you find deeper resources. It's like deeper strength to move on and not be completely destroyed by it, which would destroy anybody. And it's a mystery, but it's there. And what the Torah always taught was that the soul, no matter what happens in your life, the innermost depths of your soul do not get scathed or hurt by anything. You may suffer, but ultimately you're not a sufferer. And you do have that pilot flame. And that's where healing comes from. And again, the Ani Hashem Refecha, that connection, Atem Adveikim B'Hashem Elokeichem Chaim Kol Chamayim, you connect to you plug into the source, and when you plug into the source, that is the best preventive possible medicine. And it's not just based on faith, it's based on a sense of urgency, a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, which is what infuses a person with the greatest strengths. There's no question. When you go to a hospital and you see two people, one has visitors and guests and people egging him on and so on, no question. And then the other person is sitting alone, no one comes to visit. You tell me, does that have an impact? Of course. Because one person loses the fight. There's no one there, no one giving us strength, no one believing in us. You don't have that. And when the other person has that type of, it gives strength and I'll fight on. And you like, in some sense, it gives you additional edge. So preventive medicine is far more than just a few actions you do. It's a whole state of being that really gives you the power to literally preempt problems. Literally preempt problems. And this is not, just as I said, read Viktor Frankl. He says it clearly. He doesn't use the word preventive. Maybe he does. I don't recall now. But the point, okay. So with that I say one more point I want to make, and that is, so he continues the verse that the Machle Mitzrayim, so it's connected to dissonance, it's connected to constraints. So he says, Loi osim, I will not place it upon you, ki ani Hashem Rafecha, because I am God, I'm your healer. Which means I give you the healing power when you connect to the sense of purpose that I have invested in you. Now, interestingly, nothing less than the Declaration of Independence essentially says that. What does it say? All men are created equal, created, and endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. And the Founding Fathers recognized that that is the foundation of everything. And that is essentially the strongest point of the United States. We may have messed up in many ways, there are plenty of problems in this country. But that foundational element, nobody has ever institutionalized that principle, except the Torah. From the Torah to the United States American Constitution, no one has institutionalized that, and that is significant. This is why I believe in this country for that reason, because as long as you hold on to those principles, now we've wandered away, we don't talk about it that much, and it's become kinds of distortions around it, but it still remains the core principles. And if you think about it, that's what it's saying. It's saying, I am God, I'm giving you those equal rights, each human being, and no one has a right to control another person. So it's again, each person has that equal. Now, of course, the Founding Fathers, I don't think thought about it in the context of health or in the context even of spirituality. They understood it as a necessity for a republic to flourish because they bear the brunt England and European discrimination and no freedom of religion, no freedom of expression. But at the end of the day, what they stated is the basis of a healthy society. That ability of coexistence, knowing that you have absolute right and I have absolute right, and you can't tell me, you can't dictate to me. I'm just pointing out that point. In a way, it's almost reminiscent of that verse. It's similar to the beginning of the Ten Commandments. I am your God that took you out of Egypt. And they understood, even though they were deists and they were not trying to advocate religion, they understood that if you don't invoke creator, because they could have said all men are born equal, all men are equal. If they don't invoke a creator, then it could always be interpreted that some humans can decide to take it away from other humans. Once you invoke the creator, none of us are the creator. Now, I haven't seen that written by any of the founding fathers, but to me that's like an obvious reason why they would throw that word in. They could have easily, the writer could just write, all men are born equal. We would say all people are born equal, so it shouldn't be misinterpreted. They must have meant men because they thought at that point that blacks were whatever, a quarter human. Third. Yeah, but interesting, their own statement undermined their own slaves, because at the end of the day, the United States did guarantee, they just looked at blacks, unfortunately, the wrong way. But once you understand that blacks are human beings, then they're promised the same equal rights by the same creator. So in a way, they put into their own undoing. I think,
That's what amendments are for.
Yeah. Well, there was the amendment that did that?
Yeah.
That freed the slaves. But now when we say all men are created equal, from that point of view, it refers to everyone.
14, clarify equal rights.
Okay, clarify that. Okay, that's fine. I think George Washington. I was just in Washington when someone went to visit Mount Vernon, and they said Washington freed all his slaves before he died. But not earlier than that. I guess. Okay, it was a different climate. I'm not going to go ahead now. It's a separate discussion. I'm not turning them into tzaddikim. The point, however, is that we have a real formula here. And if you really apply this formula, no matter where you are in life, you begin to realize that your connection to your divine purpose is ultimately the best preemptive medicine you'll ever introduce into your life. You have that, everything else follows. Now, the challenge is, how do we do that once we're driving at 90 miles an hour in a rush hour and on a merry-go-round or a rat race? All the analogies I'm using all at once. Well, you have to pause. You have to pause and stop and say, listen, let me get my act together. You want to build a beautiful home. You want to find the soulmate. You want to be the true divine agent that you were meant to be. You can't just allow your life to take over. You need to pause and stop and say, let me look at my priorities. What am I doing? What's a means and what's an end? God should bless everyone, should be successful materially, but materialism is a means, it's not an end. The tools, the gadgets, the technology, these are means, these are tools. Simple as that. They are not an end. They do not guarantee us success. They give us the tools. What guarantees success is the mission statement, is the purpose of it all, your particular purpose. I can't resist, but I just, that poem to me is very so poignant. Oliver Wendell Holmes' poem called The Voiceless, and that line where he says, alas to those that die with their song still inside them. The song is that preventive medicine. The song is your soul's melody, its song, its divine song, its divine purpose, the reason you came here. And you can spend your whole life with all the tools and all the blessings of medicine and technology and science and not know your own song. I would say, if I had to choose, I would choose the song over all the gifts. But we don't have to make that choice. We could have both. There's no reason. No one ever said you have to give up the comforts of our lives. You just have to make your priorities, put them in place. So that, my friends, is part of the formula and the secret of this month. And it's, I am the healer that helps you prevent all the maladies and diseases and infections, physical and spiritual, that come from the Mitzrayim, from the constraints and the dissonance and disconnect, the self-consciousness of the object and the subject. So may everybody be blessed to be able to really just feel that seamless, that you're so much in the zone, you're just doing what you have to do, and you don't even realize it. That's the best of all. Thank you so much. You guys make me smile. Great. Beautiful. Let's stop this. One second. Well, unless you want to be broadcast on tonight's nightly news. Bill O'Reilly. Of course, Sandy.
So I was going to comment as you were talking about the joy in the children and stuff. One of the most joyous times I've ever seen you was when I went to you invited me to the wedding of either your daughter or son.
Oh, yeah.
And I walked in, and you were there in total joy, dancing. Of course, I walked in a little late. This beaming smile from ear to ear, in total zone of that evening. And it was the
You
most
hit the nail on the head.
amazing
It was unbelievable. My daughter probably. It was in New York, and my son was married in Pittsburgh.